Australian corporates are arrogant and should expect to be smacked with much bigger fines this year, according to a fired-up ACCC chair, Rod Sims.
Mr Sims pointed to a few examples of poor behaviour. Telstra and Ford were singled out. They both copped fines of around $10 million last year, but he was explaining going forward he'd be pushing for fines of way north of $100 million. For Taking Stock, our panel tonight, we're joined by Shivani Gopal, CEO of The Remarkable Woman, and Scott Phillips, Chief Investment Officer at The Motley Fool. Good evening to both of you. Pretty strong language, which is why I wanted to pick this one tonight, from the ACCC boss. The arrogance of corporates, I guess we've talked a little bit about that. But I did feel when I read that and his comments that I feel like maybe 2019 is going to be the year of the consumer. Should we feel fired up that this might just be our year, or am I being too optimistic?
No, look, I'd like to be optimistic as well, Brooke. I've got to say, the ACCC, ASIC, APRA, they've kind of been criticised and reasonably fairly for being a little bit asleep at the wheel, either not looking hard enough, not pushing hard enough, not taking companies to court when they deserved it, trying to settle rather than do the deals. It kind of has echoes a little bit of the GFC, right, when the ratings agencies were kind of saying, well, we kind of need to work with you guys, so let's find a way through this, rather than holding their fire. Now, to be fair to some of those agencies, governments of both stripes have taken a whole lot of money out of the budgets of those organisations. So for them to go back and say, hey, ASIC should be tougher, ACCC should be tougher, if one thing for governments to say and politicians to say, then I think for them to give them the resources required to do this stuff, they've got a limited amount of funds, right? They've got a limited amount of lawyer time. So they're looking at their cases saying, well, how do we get this done? Well, we can't fight all these cases. Settle that one, settle that one, settle that one, and maybe we'll take that one to court. And that's kind of the problem. I'd love to think those sort of fines, $10 million fine for Telstra, come on, that's a cost of doing business. I mean, realistically, if you're a telco, we've talked about this before, if you're a telco and you can go to the market and say, I'm going to make a claim like this. If we get away with it, great. If we don't, it'll cost us $10 million. Put it in the budget, job done. I'm not saying they do it deliberately, of course, but if you're weighing up the pros and cons of Telstra had their unlimited data plan, for example, I had to walk that one back. If you make that claim that sticks in my mind, sticks in your minds, sticks in our viewers' minds, that's kind of the story, right? So $100 million, I'd love to see a fine like that. That'd really make people wake up and take notice, rather than treating ASIC or ACCC or any of those guys as kind of, again, a cost of doing business, right? Something to deal with if we have to, but if we do, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Right. Shivani, what do you think? Do you think that this is kind of, this is the start of a new ACCC, a fired-up Rod Sims here?
Yeah, look, it definitely is. And we've certainly seen in corporations behaving badly, both with, great acts of arrogance and ignorance. And when it comes to big corporations, you've really got to wonder what's worse, right? And when it comes to the year of consumerism, you can see that it's really being birthed out of the Royal Commission, where it's brought back to light this culture which should be embraced around the consumer, the community, values, protection, but really good corporate stewardship. And you can see now that what Rod Sims is really doing is actually putting the fear of God into people. So coming off your point there, Scott, yeah, sure, they've had really limited funds. And when you think about before law and order existed, us humans were regulated by hope and fear. And so, with limited funds, he's sort of standing up and saying, hang on a second, I'm going to broadcast very clearly to all executives, and I'm going to put you on notice. If you do the wrong thing, there's going to be a huge fine to pay, so you better not do anything incorrectly. And yes, you can also see the other undercurrent that's playing there, which is, the ACCC looking at ASIC going, oh my goodness, they've really been, bashed publicly and through the Royal Commission. We don't want that to be us. So what can we do to make sure that we're playing the game right? And so, of course, they're standing up and saying we're going to have some really strong investigations. There's going to be some strong fines. Don't you dare step a foot wrong. Hope and fear usually works. In this case, let's see.
You do hope it's instilling fear. I mean, I do think also, though, the example of the ACCC coming out, it was just a few months ago, to say to the petrol companies, we're watching petrol prices, we can see the margins are too high, and then this response from Caltex is, yeah, they say that about once a year. Okay, they can say that in the media, but...
It's the Glenn Stevens jawbone, right, applied to consumers.
Yeah.
I have to say, look, that being said, I want to give Sims and the ACCC the benefit of the doubt. I hope we do system change. I hope it does matter.
And they did the recent crackdown with the... the advertising of fares and refunds with regards to the airfares. Right. A couple of, small consumer wins. I think we just want to see it bigger.
You got it. And look, to Shivani's point, one big fine is all we will need. If we can get one company, $100 million, couple $100 million, all of a sudden every boardroom in the country is going to say, guys, $10 million was okay. We can't put $100 million in the budget here for a fine if we do the wrong thing. We better make sure we're squeaky clean. It does. It's all about risk and reward, right? If the risk gets bigger, then the reward's going to have to be, they're not going to take that risk. And if we can change that behaviour, that helps. To your point about year of the consumer, the other thing I really like is the growing influence of social media. And we're seeing so much of people power, literally that ground up people power as well as the ACCC. Hopefully the combination of those will see some better behaviour this year.
Yeah, Shivani, to your point about the Royal Commission, surely the time is right now to be having this conversation, to be coming down hard on corporates. There's no better time, really. And also when you consider some of the other headlines that we see, like earlier in tonight's show, we were talking about one speed camera in Sydney bringing in $640,000 in 1 month. So, you know, surely you go, right, well, if I'm speeding, I'll cop the fine, sure. But if you guys are doing the wrong thing, $10 million, yeah, maybe $100 million is more in the ballpark. So do you think that a big whack like that will change the game?
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger the consequence, the bigger the precaution. And I think that's what we're going to see now is, you know, large companies saying, well, instead of doing, you know, again, to Scott's point, instead of saying, well, we've got so much margin to make here, we can afford to make the wrong move just in case, they're not going to play that way now, and it's going to be a lot more, you know, to the of safety, I think.
All right, absolutely. We've got another topic that we wanted to have a chat about, which is that a single South Australian detective is investigating $100 million in losses from Australians to international cold call scammers. That is just this one detective who is looking into this many cold call scams, $100 million. So we're said to be the #1 target now from some countries who are cold call scamming. So why do you think we're having such trouble here? Are we too gullible? Or are we do we fall for this too easily, Shivani?
You know, I had a good think about this, and as Australians, I think it's in our vernacular to believe people. I mean, after all, we always say fair go, right? And we want to give other people a fair go. But I actually don't think we're any more gullible than the next person. You know, it's in human behaviour that we want to believe and see the best in people. I think, if anything, this is a testament of poor law enforcement, and it's a testament of our law enforcement actually not keeping up with technology. Because if you think about it, and if you look at the people who are being targeted, they're a generation of people who have not grown up with computers. So of course they're going to be more vulnerable when they're being targeted. And naturally we want to see and believe the best in people. So they're going to seem a little bit vulnerable, and they're going to perhaps be a little bit easier to part away with their money. What you've got to also question is, why are there so many different state-based law enforcement agencies when it comes to cybercrime? Cybercrime is borderless. It can happen absolutely anywhere. You have one detective doing this study with these great findings. Imagine if our agencies got together. What could they be capable of, folks?
That's a really good point.
It's really interesting too, I think, when you think about the dollar value of this stuff. I mean, this is globalization, right? So most of these cold calls coming from overseas, you can grab a very, very cheap employee from one of those developing world countries, pay them cents on the dollar, and get them to just dial the phone, right? Think about, you know, it literally is that idea of the outbound sales in just literally in this case, a legal rather than a legal product you're trying to sell, or in this case, get money for. You just roll through the process, grab the number, dial a 10-digit number starting with 04. You get someone in Australia, asking for some money, doesn't work, you hang up the phone, you try again. If you're paying someone, literally, as I said, cents in the dollar, you don't need that high success rate to make it work. So in terms of why Australia is among the targets, it makes perfect sense, right? You want to target a very affluent country with, as Shivani says, some trusting people. If you do a good job of the sales call and say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I want, here's what I'd like, please, thank you very much, it doesn't take much to turn that into a $100 million problem, and that's exactly what we're saying.
Scott, apparently a lot of the cold calls are, you know, posing as a broker and invest, some sort of investment here. I can get you into offshore markets and help you make a good return. I mean, Chief Investment Officer at the Motley Fool, is this a problem with our mentality when it comes to our money and what we think we should and could be investing in, that we are open to these sorts of calls?
Yeah, it drives me mad. Look, people, we talked about fear and greed before. This is exactly what this is about, right? Something that's too good to be true often is. We all know we should be careful, but it's kind of that, like, oh, maybe, but if it was legitimate, maybe I could make some money, and who couldn't do us some extra money? So I might just go and just follow this along and see what I can do. A skillful salesperson, some plausible ideas. I've seen on Facebook just recently people, you know, you post in a group this binary options trading stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen that in social media recently. It's another version of the same thing. Invest $400, make $4,000. Invest $10,000, make $100,000. It's this easy. Now, of course it's not. We all know that, right? We're in this space. But for other people who are looking at that same, Bitcoin was the other thing a couple of months ago, right? Earn money from Bitcoin. Just, you know, contact me. Let me know. Tell you how. It's almost pyramid marketing, you know, in a financial way. There is so much of it out there, and again, the problem is you don't need that higher success rate. Again, online, one email sent to how many 100,000 people. It's a very, very low cost. So the ROI doesn't need to be much to start making some money, and that's exactly why these sorts of things, using technology, whether it's telephony, whether it's online, it's just so easy to make work because you don't need that much of a return to justify the cost.
I am feeling this is tying back into our earlier segment on this show about non-linear decision weight.
True.
Julia
Got
Lee
it,
missed
yeah.
that. It'll be coming up a little bit later. Also, Bill and Melinda Gates have explained the importance of their pledge to give away their $90 billion fortune. Actually, they're not the only ones who say their kids will not be handed their bank balance when they die. Richard listers like Gordon Ramsay, Simon Cowell, Mark Zuckerberg, Nigella Lawson, Sting are among those who say their kids won't be left with their fortune. But we love the reasons that they said they'll be giving away their money, guys. They described their philanthropy as meaningful and fun. I mean, obviously meaningful, but yeah, what a way to describe it to other people for it to be a fun concept, Shivani.
Yeah, look, I thought so too, and they also said it was their life's work, and that made me really sit back and go, goodness, it's not building Microsoft. Their life's work is actually giving their wealth away and helping other people. And what I think is so wonderful about their charitable actions in the Gates Foundation is that they get their children involved too. So their children aren't going, hang on a second, I'm not getting these billions of dollars in my inheritance. They're saying, how great is this? I get to actually contribute and add to the benefit of greater communities.
They pretty much said it was their kids' whole life.
Exactly.
Like their time they've been alive has been involved in the charitable foundation work. And what's so right from the get-go, right?
Absolutely. And what's so wonderful is they've set an example through the Gates Foundation that other people have signed up to on what it's like to be altruistic. And I think, going back to our conversation earlier about, big corporations behaving badly, everyone and anyone can be altruistic. You don't need to be a Gates. You could be anyone who thinks, I'm going to donate some of my money, or I'm going to donate some of my time. And you too could actually say, well, hang on, instead of giving my kids pocket money, I'm going to say, well, why don't you donate? So it's a wonderful ripple effect that can occur through the example that they're setting.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, good to see people like Sting too planting some fields of gold.
That's good. I like it a lot.
I had to work hard for that one. It wasn't actually very good. I couldn't
Not why we get him on the show.
I appreciate it. I like it.
If I was here for a hero, I wouldn't be back next week. Look, what I like about it, Warren Buffett talks about giving his kids enough to do anything, but not enough to do nothing. And I quite like that. Not only is it the altruism on one level, but it's also, frankly, again, for the kids themselves. Well, my kids don't need X billion dollars, right? Like, there's only so much that I can leave them at all, sure, and that'd be fine. But I can do a whole lot more. Gates is eradicated as a polio. I think is effectively eradicated now worldwide, largely because of what the Gates Foundation is doing. Which, if you think about the impact of that, like there's scars of impact. And to Shivani's point, we can all do something ourselves, even in small ways. But for the Gates Foundation, which includes some of the requests of Buffett and others, to literally take that money and eradicate a disease globally, that is just such a phenomenal outcome, right? It's hard not to be just super impressed by that sort of stuff. And when celebrities and people who have done well over time are giving that sort of money and setting that example, both just the pure dollar value of the money is phenomenal. And the example as well, again, that same idea of the rich people, yes, they can afford to give it away, and that's the kind of need of, okay, well, if you've got 90 billion, you can afford to give 80 of it away. But they don't have to do that, right? They're choosing to do that because they want to have that sort of impact. And it really does show what can be done with a bit of motivation. And again, Bill Gates has changed his life's purpose to solving some of these massive, massive health and education crises. It's pretty inspirational.
To be able to genuinely change the world.
Right, literally.
That many people can actually put their stamp to. So that's pretty interesting. It's
pretty awesome.
Scott Phillips from The Motley Fool, thank you very much. Shivani Gopal from The Remarkable Woman, thank you very much for coming into the studio.